The Finance Committee for Wednesday, June 23rd will come to order. We'll have a roll call, please. Got to do that on mic.
There you go.
The Finance Committee of Wednesday, June 23rd will come to order. Will we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Lear,
Present.
Mr. Sponson, Mr. Hess, Ms. Polk, Ms. Weber,
Present.
Mr. Payton,
Present.
Ms. Parker,
Present.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Present.
Mr. Fairfield,
Present.
Mr. Featherling,
Present.
Mr. Dunnell,
Present.
Mr. Miller,
Present.
Mr. Long,
Present.
Mr. Hunter,
Present.
Mr. Wheeler,
Present.
Mr. Searoy.
Present.
We have a quorum.
I have no request for public comment, or is there any request for public comment? No request for public comment. We move to the minutes for May 26th. Is there a motion to approve those minutes? Mr. Hunter and Mr. Miller seconds. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. We have a couple of quick items we need to add to the agenda. One of them is an emergency in nature from Mr. Gessner. Do you want to speak to that, or you want the chairman to?
I'll speak to that.
All right. Would you want to come on up? Yes, please. Ms. Featherling?
Motion to amend agenda.
This is an emergency item, so I think we can do it without a motion on the agenda.
Okay.
But thank you for checking on that.
Thank you very much.
Number 3.
My mic?
Okay, number 3. Gotcha.
One more time. Good morning, everybody. Today, I'm in front of you today. I have a request in emergency authorization to purchase a critical X-ray equipment for the Kankakee County Coroner's Office. In recent weeks, our current equipment has been failing us. I've been researching and try to get alternative to replace options, and which would cost less efficient for long term. But on June 22nd, which was yesterday, the current X-ray machine equipment failed me, which caused me a delay to an autopsy, which was a homicide case, which has to have a full body X-ray on that. We got the body in roughly about 7:30 in the morning. The doctor was coming at 9, and we couldn't get that machine. We had taken one shot, and that was it. So that was very disturbing to me, because what do you do next? Take the body out over to the hospitals, or out to another county that does X-rays. But currently, the coroner's office is utilizing a GE portable machine, which was obtained by us in 2005, which is estimated. We refurbished it, and it was estimated to be 20 years prior to that. In addition, as some of you remember, we lost our development. We developed all of our film in the morgue, and we couldn't get fluid anymore to be able to do the development. So we had to go digitalized. So I bought that out of my funds, which was roughly almost $20,000 to put digital in there. We utilized that just now. We just got a maintenance agreement. We're out of the warranty of that digital, which costs us roughly about $4,000 a year for the warranty on that. And that doesn't count what's wrong with the machine as it is when they come in. So I went out to basically get some quotes on what it would cost us to bring something in like this. And I received 2 quotes from New Equipment from an RPS Imaging and a Dicon Solution, which are both reputable companies. Both quotes are for a Jade mobile solution. Basically, it's a mobile X-ray machine. It's something new. You can actually, it's almost like a 2-wheeler. You can haul it anywhere you want to. Or you can put a couple of, Eric and I went out and saw the demonstration on it. You can put legs down on that and be able to roll it. For instance, a couple times we thought about using it over in the sheriff's department, but with the big machine that we had, we couldn't get it over there. This one here would be able to go over there. They offered us a 5-year warranty on this, and both companies, this would be the delivery, the setup, and the training for it. And the quotes. Remind yourself, all of my deputies are trained to be able to do x-rays, which is a cost savings. And we do that only on deceased people. We can't do it on live people. So you'd have to be, that's the way we had it before, where we had to get an x-ray tech to come out. But, you know, we're 24 hours. We could receive a body at 2:30 where the police department want to know if there's any projectiles in it. We're able to get it to them that quick. The RPS imaging is about $34,900. The DICON solution was $39,090. We got to go, like I say, we went over to Oak and got a demonstration on this from the RPS. We saw that, and it was a very, very interesting. They're able to give us that quote at $34,900. I am requesting that this be the quote that we accept. The RPS is image out of Michigan City, Indiana. They have worked locally around the different healthcare facilities. We're not the only ones that will have this new machine. If approved, it could take 3 to 4 weeks before we could obtain this equipment. I do have a backup solution plan in progress right now. Other counties have already gone ahead and purchased this through their American Recovery Plan. A portion of this, of the overall costs into the corners, we put the budget, we put the $4,000 for that warranty in our budget. But not all of this is going to be covered by our budget. I do have special funds that I can cover some of the costs of this equipment, but also falls under, we feel it also falls under the guidelines funds of American Rescue and Recovery Plan that can be utilized. In addition, one other thing that could help quite considerably, I saw the sheriff come in right now, but this is an additional thing that possibly that they can use. It can be brought over to their facility, very easy, and the computer goes with it, and they can take a photograph within a matter of seconds. We saw this, how quick it comes out. So this can be used, but they would have to have some type of certified X-ray technician, which we had before. I mean, you can get those out of the college if you had to. But I think that would be a cost savings to of the corrections department, and have that available 24 hours a day.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, just to give some background, Bob called me late in the day yesterday. I did speak to the sheriff about the last thing he just mentioned, and there is interest there to use it. He has the medical staff that could easily have that certification. Anytime there's any instance of a potential break in a bone or anything where x-ray is required, we pay that out of the county general fund when we have to send people to the hospital, if they are our own residents. So that is really a long-term cost savings to do this, and checked with Mr. McCarty, rescue funds are definitely appropriate, the lost revenue side of things, not the COVID side, but the lost revenue side. And then late in the day, I got a hold of the state's attorney, talked to them about the need for an opinion on an emergency declaration on this, because obviously we need to be able to have this for crimes like Mr. Gessner's talking about and other things, but there is a lead time. So if we wait till the full board, we're still 3 weeks out, and we can't go that long. So Mr. Coughlin is here, the assistant state's attorney, if the board needs verification. Anyone needs to speak to the emergency nature of this, but it is teed up that this is okay for the approval of this committee.
Mr. Kissinger.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Gessner. Is this machine new technology and a new machine, or a used machine and old technology?
Good question. It's a new machine.
A new technology.
Brand new one. Mm-hmm.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Hunter.
I know we do this thing in a haphazard way. Let me do this, then we'll have the discussion. I would move that we would concur with the recommendation of the coroner for the price as stipulated by him on this particular matter.
Is there a second? Mrs. Parker, did you want to discuss your motion, Mr. Hunter?
Well, yeah, I think he's given us a very thorough justification for it. Additionally, the usage not only by his office but the sheriff's office, and the full explanation by Chairman Wheeler, as well as consulting with the sheriff and consulting with the state's attorney. I don't think there's any further questions that we may have regarding the necessity for it and the justification for the emergency purchase.
Mr. Featherington.
Mr. Gessner, is the warranty included in the price? I didn't.
Yes.
I know you talked about it.
Yes.
And then, is there a limit to how many people that could be trained? I mean, can you train 5 people to use it, or 4 people included?
My staff?
Yeah.
My whole staff is trained.
Okay, but I mean, the company was gonna come out and help you learn how to use the new one?
Absolutely.
So is there a limit to, I mean, can you have a sheriff come over there, or deputies, or
I would
what?
imagine we can arrange that.
And
if
you could
that's-
have
if that's what he
quite a
wants.
few. I mean, you can't just have one person get trained,
He
right?
might have one that's certified already. I don't know.
Okay.
I've not
Right.
talked to him.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Seawright.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gessner, is there any chance that the company that you're gonna purchase this equipment for might have a demo that you could get immediately, or something that you could work, because it's an emergency, something that you could maybe say, hey, mine just went out in the corner of Kankakee County. Is there anything you could get me tomorrow? I mean, that's my question. If you buy the new machine, yeah, with the purchase of the new.
That's the motion, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can arrange something on that aspect there.
Let's think outside.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? If there's no more discussion, we'll have a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dennell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Wheeler, motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the matter, the attention and the support. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
We have one other item that needs to be transacted before July 1, and so it has to be discussed today. Ben Wilson would be speaking to this. Could either come up front or use the back mic, whatever you're comfortable with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we received from IDOT our MPO intergovernmental agreement. So it's an intergovernmental agreement between the county and IDOT for our federal and state funding to fund the MPO. We received it this month, and it's currently undergoing review with the state's attorney's office. But we just received an email 15th or 16th of this month from Tom Caldwell, who's our contact, and he said IDOT would really like to see these executed by July 1. The start date for this contract is the July 1 date. So we want to bring the full document to the full board for everyone's review. I'll just say with IDOT contracts, one of the pieces, and actually it's now in Tom's email, there's a little disclaimer on kind of IDOT doesn't allow us to change contracts, so we can review them. We brought the last contract forward. We had some comments from the state's attorney's office, and they came back and said that's great, but we do 100 of these a year, and we don't make changes to our contracts. So we expect a concurrence to happen with the state's attorney's office, but we'd really like a head nod to allow the chairman to sign it by that July 1 date, and then be actionable and reviewed by the full board at the July board meeting, which is, it's a little out of sync. It's just, that's what happens when we get a June submittal from the department, and then we end up with our timeline doesn't exactly necessarily fit their timeline, so we're asking for maybe a little change. But these are funds that come to the county, so it manages and funds our MPO. Between the state and federal side, it's about $330,000 that we'll be receiving, like we do every other year. But we just it's a little out of sync, and they're really trying to get these executed by July 1. So,
Any questions? Is there anything we're going to go ahead with this then? Yes. I see general approval, and I don't hear any questions on it, so I think that you need to proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we move to presentations. Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For those that were here yesterday, I apologize for the redundancy. You'll hear a lot of the same things, but there are some members of this committee that are non-executive, so I at least want to run through things and give people time. I may not be as verbose, and I'm sure you're happy for that. And that's why we record meetings. So if there are the full details and the full discussion we had yesterday, please check out the video. So in general, Kelly, you're glad for the next slide. Our Respond, Reinvest initiative, if you will, and Revitalize, excuse me, is broken out into where the county board is going to manage the entire thing. Heavy public input throughout the entire process at multiple places, sometimes within the same committee structure. The executive committee will handle policy, do a little bit of a project insertion that supports the policy, and the finance committee, this committee, will handle the funding, ranking, and execution of that. The full board is obviously approving budgets and things like that, so as far as the approval of the spending, that's where that comes overall when we do claims and things like that, and the actual budgets for the following year. But know that all board members are asked to participate in the subcommittee structure that we will talk about in a little bit. And you'd be a voting member when you see your name on there. You're a voting member of that subcommittee, but anybody can attend any subcommittee and be part of the discussion. And that's important, as long as, and the public can do so as well. So I wanted to mention that on the front end. The next slide, under Respond, as we got the initial input from community stakeholders, from hospitals, from businesses. I mean, it's been coming for about, maybe 2 months since this was announced. We've been getting suggestions and requests from different entities within the county, things that we could do better next time if a pandemic comes in, things like that, which has been really helpful in order to frame the buckets that we're looking at here. So in general, the subcommittee structures, there's a Respond subcommittee grouping, a Revitalize grouping, and a Reinvestment grouping. And under that are specific subcommittees that have presented themselves from these ideas that people have given to us. So there was a group of public safety / emergency management suggestions and or requests. There were groups of things that involve the courts. We've heard of some of those from if you're on criminal justice, from the chief judge, and things that impact all offices that serve the courts, whether it's public defender, state's attorney, even the sheriff's department, probation. We've got anybody and everybody, that's involved there, sending things. And then there's another bucket, which is kind of things that didn't fit into a category right away. As we get more input from the public and board members start to sink their teeth into this and come up with ideas and initiatives they think that might help, that other bucket may break up into a new bucket that we say, okay, there's 6 things that pertain to this, whatever it is. So that's somewhat fluid as it stands right now. And those are all under the Respond area. We have to respond to the pandemic in these areas. And believe me, other has things that are involving the public. Is just not internal. Our main focus of the county is how we respond to the pandemic and other emergencies going forward. But that doesn't mean we're not gonna, it's not exclusive of working with other community partners that deal with the human impact of this as well. So the revitalization effort, we broke it up into the 2 large buckets to start with workforce and revitalizing business, because those were the 2 that just jump out at you real quick. That other is there as a placeholder, because I'm sure there will be things that come up that don't fit into that. So I'm trying to leave room for expansion, modification, as the process evolves. I mean, this is totally new, just like the last year and a half have been something we've never experienced in government, personal lives, or anything. We're trying to really invent a process without inventing a bureaucracy. That's important here, because that will outlast any funds to support the bureaucracy. So we have to be very careful on what we're talking about within county government, because as I will talk about towards the end, we're very limited on funds for the actual operations side of this. we've got a lot of money from the feds for the implementation, but the operation side is very limited. Even more so now that the state has gone the direction they have in Springfield. So moving on to the next one, the general flow of this and how this committee fits in. It started off on that first square as just public and intra and intergovernmental input, whether I was talking to mayors, department heads, county board members, the public, community groups, faith-based, all the different groups that we said, well, you know, what are you thinking? You know, just to help form some thoughts and processes here. That formed the buckets that you were seeing right now. And it may, it may change, and we may add some as we go forward. But then the executive subcommittees, which you'll see in a moment, they will start to you know, dive into this based on the particular topic that they're under. They will set the policy first that supports an overarching approach to an issue. And we talked about some examples yesterday, and you know, so if you want to watch that video to kind of get through that, but the policy drives the action and the initiative that would support that policy, not vice versa. Otherwise, we may end up with a bunch of non-connected initiatives that are just taking little pieces of a problem. We should probably identify problems and try to impact them rather than just throw money at stuff. That's kind of the way I'm hoping the board approaches that. So by this process, the policy should direct the spending. They'll send that to the executive committee. So the policy will be developed in the subcommittee. The executive committee will approve the policy or reject it after public input. And then the executive committee would also populate and rank those initiatives to send over to the finance committee. Just as they have a group of initiatives at that point that support the policy, they'll throw them over there. There may be more debate required at executive, or they may have that debate over at the finance side of things. I think it might be a good idea to have it executive, because I think finance committee should focus on the numbers, the funding, and the ranking, but we can work through that as it presents itself. And then they'll send that to the finance committee once it's ranked. They'll get public input again. They will prioritize and cost these, which is almost, you have to do those at the same time, because you may have something, as I mentioned yesterday, that there's a $25 million price tag on, so it's probably gonna rank pretty low on the list. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time on working through the details of that project when it's number 60 on a list that may end at number 12. So we'll figure that out as we go, but it'll become obvious once we get to that point. They will send those ranked and costed initiatives to the full finance committee, this committee. And after public input, they will approve or reject, and the finance will then execute, and the full board will monitor the whole situation. The key is that we will communicate between committees, we will communicate with other municipalities, we will communicate and try to coordinate as much as possible with anybody who wants to work on these umbrella initiatives. We aren't necessarily focusing on what's going on within municipalities, because they have their own buckets of money and grants and other things. But we should always look for opportunities to coordinate to stretch the impact of our combined money further for issues that impact us all, or a large portion of us all. So that's another purposeful step that we should take. Again, robust opportunity for public input, and the process will remain consistent for each committee. When you see these committees, they are executive committee led, if you will, at the beginning with policy, but then they will just flip over to be finance committee subcommittees. So the same people that are discussing the policy and become really intimate and understand where it came from and where the implementation may lie, they will be working on the finance side of it as well. So there won't be the need to relearn everything from the very beginning. We're trying to be as fluid as possible. So is there any questions about this before we go forward?
Mr. Hunter.
Yeah, you guys may recall that 80% of the expenditures involve the court system as well as public safety. Given that fact, and I mentioned yesterday, and I'm going to, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, we need from the administration a priority list of needs, not wants, but needs We've heard the chief judge talk about a new management system they need. There's some additional things that the sheriff may want. Be mindful that, again, 80% of our expenditures are public safety and courts. You would think, a rational person would think that if there's a priority list, you know, they would be germane to the court system as well as public safety. Of course, there's some ancillary issues we need to deal with as well too. You know, you may recall last month, this month, or whatever, Cavender made a presentation about the freezers and stuff. They can only accommodate 2. And I think, if I can't I don't know if I misheard him, but I think he wanted something that would accommodate more. I'm not sure of the number, 8 or what, but that's something we're going to have to deal with as well too. So all I'm saying to you, I don't want to hear presentations coming from outside saying, well, we need a skating rink. I mean, I heard that at the city, you know, about how the money would be used. The lady said, we need a skating rink. I'm not so sure that's the highest and best use of our money. All I'm saying to you is that, and we articulated to the chairman yesterday, give us a priority list of needs, and be mindful of cost. So all I'm saying is that I don't want to hear these extraneous presentations, but we'll hear them. There'll be people coming here asking for the world, but you know, there's limits as to what we can actually do and consider. So that's what we're looking for. And the chairman concurred with that. He had asked the department heads to provide not necessarily a wish list, but a priority list of things they need.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Mr. Chairman, you want to go on?
Yes. So the next slide is just the, under the response, you know, respond category, just, you know, and some of those initial requests that Mr. Hunter was talking about are over on the right that say potential projects. Those are just things that have presented themselves already. That's just a short list to kind of get the, as they say, juices flowing when you're thinking about what this committee is going to be doing. The public safety and emergency management bucket. So the people that are on here are on this committee. Again, if you can't be there, you can't do it, that's okay, I understand. And you can go to other committees. If you want to switch up and do something else, let me know. This was just a place to start. I tried to leave executive committee members and finance committee members scattered throughout the committee, so there at least is that, I want to say, professional expertise of people that are used to dealing with these things on a regular basis. And then I tried to find places where people had specific personal expertise that they might be able to contribute to the overall conversation on what they do in their personal lives and their personal work. So if I missed on that, please let me know. And we're just going to kind of run through these real quick because we did all these yesterday. Again, under the respond, we need to respond to public safety and EMA. We need to respond to courts, which is the next one. The next slide, and that would be Mr. Long will chair that one with Mr. Fairfield vice chair. But those are the folks, and notice the citizen advisory. That's really an unlimited list in that area. It could be police chiefs, it could be really anybody associated with public safety. I mean, what are they? We have somebody that's like, I want to say like a forest preserve officer. I can't think of what it is. It's not forest preserve, but it's conservation. Yeah, you know, I'm not going to limit it to anything in there. It could be people that are just retired that used to do that for be involved in public safety or you know, anything emergency management. Anybody can get part of it, be part of it. It could be somebody that you know is a current elected official in another jurisdiction. It doesn't matter. If you have something to bring to the table, bring it. And as Mr. Hunter said, you know, we're going to get some interesting requests. I've already gotten a few interesting requests. But as long as they pass muster as far as being legal in terms of how we can spend money, they'll go on the board. It'll be up to the committees to prioritize those appropriately. So I don't necessarily want to discourage people thinking outside the box, but there shouldn't be any expectation that they will get ranked up towards the top but I think the good ideas definitely will float to the top. So moving on under you know, respond, it went from courts to other projects. Again, this is the bucket of things that didn't really fit into a category to start with. Moving on to workforce under revitalize. We need to revitalize the workforce. That's something that is obviously an issue. So there's really any number of things that we have heard about so far. And, you know, people
He's already under.
can be thinking about, you know,
already under revitalize.
what might impact how we revitalize our workforce within the area. The COVID has had an impact in that area, both with, as we talked about, with people that, or businesses that can't find people to work there. We should consider that as well. That's an impact of COVID. And as well as people that are undertrained or underemployed for the jobs that exist in this county. We have a high unemployment rate, not as high as some places in the state, which traditionally were more towards the top of that scale, if you will, if all things being equal. But we have a lot of open jobs, which is strange. Those two usually don't go together. So we're not alone in that. But again, under workforce revitalization, we already have commitment from KCC and the Workforce Board. Mr. Pace from the NAACP would ask to be part of that group. The more the merrier. More ideas are the better. Under revitalize for businesses, we have to work on our business community. And again, there's some samples of what have come in as ideas and requests already. You know, if there's any question about the makeup of any of that, let me know. Under revitalize, it's really the other bucket. There's nothing in there yet, but it will be the same committee members as the other bucket, just so they can follow things through and have the same type of thought process on both. And this is one where I thought that, you know, maybe under other, I talked to Randy McGill at the Housing Authority. You know, there's going to be a problem here with evictions and things that are coming up here. It was extended for another month. There may be a role that the county housing authority can play in this, because I don't think there's anybody better positioned to deal with the public than they are. That's kind of their end of the pool, and that's just not a Kankakee City institution. That's countywide. So if we're looking at addressing homelessness and other things that are happening, we should probably consider partnering with that organization. I think they're part of a solution somehow. I just don't know what yet.
She's been in the meeting.
All right, moving on. And he very graciously agreed to do that, so that was appreciated. And then reinvest is kind of a larger, I would say, catch-all right now. The reinvestment part is where we've already heard from the chief judge. Their number one identified priority in response to the COVID issue and future ongoing operations is their court management system. CourtView, we're the only county in Illinois that has this system. So every time a new law comes in that impacts how the courts are managed, which is all the time, it costs us a lot of money because we're the only ones paying the development cost on that computer system. And we have no leverage to get anything done in a timely fashion. So we heard from the chief judge. I've heard it from anybody who touches the court system over there that we have something that is beyond a dinosaur. They wonder if it was actually written in COBOL or in one of the old DOS systems. You know, I mean, it's that archaic. They use TIFFs as documents, which take sometimes 10 minutes to unload or to load up into their computer system. The clock just sits there and spins. Nobody uses TIFFs anymore because they're so large files. Everything's PDF. So it kind of gives you an idea what we're dealing with. And so the courts are just sitting there waiting for the documents to load so they can start proceeding. It's extremely cumbersome, and it has an impact on the operations within many departments of the courthouse, mainly the clerk's office, on the document flow, how it comes in, how it's processed, and everything else. So, and it doesn't allow people to work from home. So that's another problem. So we are confident that is infrastructure / COVID related. So we think that fits into the bucket. So that's why it'll be on this list at some point to consider. So we can move on And these are, for the Finance Committee, you need to hear this because this is kind of the brass tacks on where we're at on this. So the 21.3 million in ARPA funds that the county is receiving, we already got half of it, it's sitting in the bank. And we'll get another equal amount next year. So this year, we've already established the funds. This committee has acted, full board is approved. We have determined through the calculations that through the GFOA, which is the government finance, yeah, what he said. Basically, the finance guys, people who know what they're doing, unlike me. No, I'm just kidding. But there's a calculation you could break the funding up into two buckets. One that's really restrictive, which are the straight COVID funds, and the one that is less restrictive but still has a lot of restrictions on it, the lost revenue fund. So all the money can be spent on COVID things, but only the ARPA funds can be spent on COVID things. And that's the distinction I'm drawing here. It's in our best interest to have a little bit of freedom to identify things that have manifested during COVID but have a longer impact. So the splits are up there right now. We're estimating next year because they haven't said what they're going to base their lost revenue number on for the second tranche. So we're kind of estimating it's going to be the same using 2019 numbers versus today. So there you see the breakout. So it's substantial, but this helps you identify cash flow as well. You know, there are things you will commit to that probably won't be spent until 23 or 24. I can imagine some of that may be more infrastructure related. There may be other things, and we'll talk about an example here in a minute when Dan gets up there. His voting machines were going to go through this process because they're eligible for lost revenue deployment on those voting machines. We just don't have time. We got to get them on order. So we can't wait a 1 or 2 months because who knows how long they're going to be. Dan, we have a commitment on delivery, but as we've all seen during COVID, we're still waiting on an elevator. You know, people are still waiting on sliding glass doors and things to do, you know, the work at the house that just aren't here yet. So we don't want to take a chance when we have a June primary? June 28th primary. So we have to be trained up and have everything humming on all cylinders beforehand. So normally that would have went through there, I guess is what I'm saying, but we're pulling that out because we have to act on that. So
A motion, if the committee so desires, to allow Pat Polk to attend by Zoom. Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, seconds.
Question on the motion, can we do blanket or not? Or just?
Mr. Wheeler?
we will at full board. That will cover all committees, but we should vote this time because it's a separate committee. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a motion. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right. Mr. Reed, if you want to proceed.
Thank you. This was more of an explanation for this committee because we haven't really got into it in depth yet on the Finance Committee side of things. But we have, as I said yesterday, it's important to remember we have $21.3 million that the federal government says you have to spend basically by the end of 24. And you can't spend it on certain things. And I'll read this, kind of what the highlights are here. Covering payroll and benefits for public safety and public health employees is more restrictive than what was allowed under the CARES Act. And the part that's important about the next sentence is we can spend money on, to the extent that their services are devoted to mitigating or responding to the COVID-19 public health emergency, and employees' time that is dedicated to responding to the COVID public health emergency. It's not like it was before when we could just cover salaries for certain departments altogether. This has now become very restrictive, so we can't use COVID money for those types of things anymore. This committee needs to understand that, especially with the next slide taken into account. Counties may use fiscal recovery funds for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue experienced due to the COVID-19 public health emergency. I think the next line was to the extent of reduction in revenue to the public health emergency. I wanted to re-emphasize that. We have $21.3 million that we have to spend, and the state just took $5 million away from us per year in revenue. we can't spend COVID money to make up that $5 million. That would be illegal and we'd have to repay the money. Okay, so I want to draw the distinction here for both the committee and maybe others that may see the county spending money and then not spending money in certain areas at the same time. It will be confusing. It's confusing to this committee, it will be confusing to the public, because something like this has never happened before. But I can't spend the money, we can't spend the money, then it's gone, then we have to repay it, because we just got hit twice. You know, it's completely, it's just so hard to understand from an outside looking in perspective. But we are going to try to do the best we can with this fund, with these funds, for the betterment of our county infrastructure, the community, but also know that we're going to try to deal with this financial. It's not a crisis. It's a serious situation that we have a lot of work to do between now and the next budget year. But we'll try to lessen that impact as much as possible. But there is an impact when you lose $5 million a year in revenue. We're working on it. So it may seem strange if we're going to go out and fund, like one of the things is a rec area maybe at the jail, or you know, we're doing the basement at the courthouse for jury assembly, because that's a space needs issue. COVID, there is a legitimate issue to make that a space where people can coexist. We have ADA issues, but also our space needs attached to that for the circuit clerk's office, that we're moving people into the basement and office down there for clerks to spread them out a little bit. So it may seem like, well, you're spending money on this, but you're crying poor on that. The two, they're completely different situations, and I can't spend the COVID money on what was taken from us by the state of Illinois. And that's kind of where I'll leave it, I guess. The one thing I will say that these policies for the last slide, these are just suggestions from me. I think we would ask that maybe at our next executive committee meeting that this becomes ratified or amended accordingly. But you know, as practical, deploy 2 years ARPA funds on initiatives that have a long-term impact. If you just kind of throw money at something, that money's gone, and then you have, what's your impact? You got to be able to measure it as well. Where applicable, utilize special internal funds before ARPA funds are used. That just makes sense. If we're collecting fees and fines and other things, we should use those as they're dedicated to those special funds before we use ARPA funds. That doesn't mean you can't have a combination, but we should be using that source as needed. Access grant funds instead of ARPA funds when possible. So if somebody, you know, were to request money for, I'm trying to think of something, for their restaurant, let's just say, well, there's restaurant money out there separate from what the county got. They should be applying for those first, and if they're rejected or whatever, they can bring that rejection. And this is for the committee to decide, but it would make sense that if they would bring that rejection in, maybe we have a fund that helps people out that didn't fit into the box that was presented by the SBA or whatever other funding source was out there. But then also identify and support communities that were ineligible to participate in CURES, PPP, and CARES programs. So again, there were people that fell through the cracks, and they are feeling it. And a good example would be park districts. Park districts, there was no money for park districts in anything before. And so they're knocking on my door. Organizations like Humane Foundation, well, they were way down. They didn't have their big fundraisers and these types of organizations out there. So we should think about that and be aware of it. I'm not saying that each one gets $4 million, but you see where I'm going with that. We may want to help them out with expenses related to COVID as much as the funds allow. So beyond that, I had nothing else for the committee, unless they have questions.
Are there any questions on the presentation? If not, we would move to the next item, the impact of, the local impact of Senate Bill 667 and use of ARPA funds.
That was kind of mixed in with that. That was the last thing I talked
Okay,
about.
well, I wanted to make sure that we had everything covered.
Yeah, I just wanted to re-mention that Senate Bill 667, almost said 666, 667 was the bill that does not allow us to house ICE here anymore, detainees. Now families have to go to other states to see their loved ones, and those states are making the revenue, and it has done nothing to address the massive immigration problem we have in this country that we all want to see fixed. So it's really just marketing instead of impact is what we're dealing with out of Springfield. That's my own assessment. You can have your own.
All right, we move forward. We'll move to the county clerk, Mr. Hendrickson. You want to come forward? We have two items on the agenda we need to deal with before the reports. So we'll let.
Or you can do the reports now. Whatever the pleasure of the committee is.
The pleasure of the chair in this case.
Absolutely.
All right, so the first item would be authorizing purchase of voting and election solutions. Would you speak to that?
Absolutely. Good morning.
Give you.
Hope everybody's well today. I'm asking for a big ask. So if you wanted to move the next slide, Kelly. Just wanted to give you a little bit of history on where we were and where we're going. In 2004, the optical scan machines that we've been using, we purchased those through Diebold actually at the time. Where those were paid for with grants from the Help America Vote Act. A couple years later, we purchased touchscreen machines for ADA voters and actually for anybody else that wanted to use those. Those were also paid for with grant money. At the time, we also purchased the Global Election Management System. That was the system that we used to create the ballots. We had been sending that out, and we decided that it might be beneficial for us to do that in-house, so we purchased that at the time. That was not paid for with grant money, that was paid for out of budget. In 2009, Diebold said they didn't want to be in the election business anymore. They sold everything off to, actually Diebold changed their name to Premier and then sold everything off to ES&S. There was an antitrust issue, I believe, at the time, and ES&S sold off part of their equipment, the Diebold stuff, and GEMS. Dominion purchased some of those assets, which included the GEM system that we used up through this election. That equipment that we purchased back in 2004 and 2007, that was the last that was manufactured by them. So, you know, if anything that we had purchased since then was a machine that was 2004 or 2007. So we were purchasing old equipment as our spares. We needed to do that. Since we started using that equipment, I did the math. We've cast 636,098 ballots on all of that equipment in the 17 years since then. So I think we've certainly gotten our money's worth out of those. But it was at the time we realized that we're at the end of the life cycle on those. And earlier this year, we were notified by Dominion that the GEM system would no longer be supported at the end of our contract, which was the end of this year. So it certainly pushed us and prodded us to make getting new equipment a necessity. So if you could, you're already there. So there are currently only 6 vendor voting systems certified in Illinois through Dominion and ES&S. The GEM system, which we currently use, however, not going to be supported anymore. Dominion has WIN EDS, but it's only certified in Cook County and Chicago. So we don't, yeah. ES&S has 2 systems that are certified, and Hart through GBS has a system, and Liberty has a system. So we did have a demonstration from the 3 vendors that are certified outside of Cook and Chicago on May 18th. I want to thank all of them for their participation in the process. We showed that to not only staff, county board members were present for that. We also had members of the public and election judges come through. We asked them all to fill out surveys, and everybody liked something. And if we looked at the ratings for all of those systems, honest to God, within 1 to 3%, they rated the machines you know, they were pretty darn close to being equally rated. If you want to move to the next slide. So we opened up the bids at the community services meeting last week. And based on the purchase price for that equipment, ES&S's bid came in at $684,949, not $99.49, sorry. GBS's bid came in at $799,420. Liberty's was $693,660. They did say, and speaking with the chairman, I think we're looking to purchase the equipment all in one lump sum. So Liberty did say if we paid within 30 days of receiving the equipment, $674,553.
Mr. Kinzer.
Yeah, when I see that if paid within 30 days, was that on their bid?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. But we're looking at more than just the equipment. We're also looking to have a comprehensive election solution, which includes our ballots, our precinct kits, coding. You know, we've been doing coding in-house, and there were some benefits to that, but also there were some potential liabilities with that. I was the person that was doing the coding for all of that. So, you know, God forbid something happened to me, we're in a world of hurt. Okay. So one of the things that we looked at was doing, you know, was having our vendors do our coding for us. We are, I can't speak for DuPage now, but we were one of only 2 jurisdictions that were doing coding in the state of Illinois. So, but in addition to that, providing services like being there for the locking and loading. Locking and loading is getting the equipment ready to go for distribution on election day. Public test support, election day support. It's not always nice to have a vendor here for when we have questions or we have problems that might be beyond the scope of our knowledge, with retabulation support and maintenance of the equipment. So if we looked at that, and I'm sorry if you wanted to skip 2 slides now. The cost for the annual maintenance, supplies, and support, ES&S's was at $89,915. As I looked at it, it did not include the costs for what we would be coding the ballots. I think that their bid included that we would continue to do the coding in-house. GBS's was at $103,038. Liberty was $109,932. Caveat with that is what the ES&S and GBS provided was kind of like a la carte services. So what I did is I wanted to make sure that we were looking at apples and apples. So we looked at the ballot costs we averaged it out about 40,000 ballots a year is what we use. You know, odd years we don't use as many, even years we use more. So averaged out to 40,000. So we included that, the cost for the precinct kits, and all of that. Now, Liberty's bid came in as a package for, we're going to give you 480,000 ballots for the life of the contract, which is a 6-year contract. Now, 480,000 ballots, probably more than what we're going to do. But what they did say is that after, you know, whatever we don't use in that contract, they'll issue as a credit for the next contract. So let's say we had 200,000 ballots left. At 28 cents a ballot, which is what we're currently paying, that's $56,000. So, so moving on to the next slide for recommendation. So my recommendation to enter into an agreement with Liberty Systems to purchase the voting equipment, supporting equipment, and training at a cost not to exceed $693,660. And to also enter into agreement with Liberty Systems for supplies, setup services for 6 years at a cost not to exceed $641,592. That's what I got.
Other questions, Mr. Kinzer?
So summarizing your presentation, applying your experience and your understanding to the 3 bids and looking at the aspect of what all 3 offered, it's your recommendation that this is the best for the county.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Hunter?
Dan, could you explain the coding process?
Well, the coding process, what we did with GEMS, I can't speak to it with the new systems because I've not had sit-down time with the new systems, but the coding process, people would file their paperwork with us, and we would put it into the GEMS computer. The GEMS computer would then lay out the ballot so your jurisdiction might have, county board race in there, but I might have another ballot style in there where it didn't have it had a different county board race in your precinct. So we had to keep all of that in mind. Now we integrate that with our voter registration system because our voter registration has the voter codes that tell me what are the unique combinations in there. But I had to generate reports to do that and then take that information and plug it into the GEM system, which was what in turn created the ballots.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dan?
Yes, sir.
I believe the next 2 election cycles, there's a strong probability that we will have high voter turnout. And I heard you saying that the number of ballots that was being proposed by Liberty was in excess of what is our previous experiences, or at least
Correct.
equal to?
Correct. Yeah, they're offering for the 6-year contract 480,000 ballots. So that's 80,000 ballots a year for both the even years, and 80,000 for an even year election might be on the high end.
Okay. When I talked about election cycles, I was thinking general election cycles.
Sure.
Yeah, not the, all right. Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't ask you for a firm number, but do you estimate how much aside from equipment, that total election solution is for you right now? How much do you think you spend a year on it now?
Well, because the equipment is so old, there's not a lot of maintenance to do with them. It's, buy another old machine and hope that it gets you through. But our ballot costs, we're probably at $25,000 a year for the even year elections. Our election supplies, probably about another $13,000-14,000 a year.
Just thinking about the budgetary impact.
Sure,
for your
sure,
department
and certainly some of that, obviously we won't need a ballot budget item going forward. If that's, that we can discuss on how we do that with, our line items and going forward, but.
Well, I'm just looking at potentially a $60,000 a year increase for just that type of thing.
Potential. Well, it does include, we do budget for on-site support. That comes out of our election supplies. Now, our elections, and that would probably cover 80% of what we've got budgeted for election supplies. But, there's always things, we need seals to, lock the equipment down. We, other miscellaneous paper things that, website maintenance, things like that.
So what you're saying is currently those costs are split up amongst different line items.
Correct.
That they'll be all contained within this one line item, and it may be a little bit more, but.
Right. Yeah, that's not 100,000 of new budget.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Ms. Weber, what was the recommendation of the community services? Did they have a recommendation?
They recommended totally to come to this committee for approval after he
All right.
examined them.
Is there a motion then to approve this, Mr. Fairfield?
Well, I can make a motion that we accept Mr. Hendrickson's.
Just a minute, I gotta get you on the mic still.
I'd like to make a recommendation or a motion that we accept Mr. Hendrickson's evaluation and his proposal for the voting machines.
And Mr. Payton seconds that. Mr. Wheeler?
Just want to clarify, does that include purchasing it all up front for the savings? And by the way, that comes out of our lost revenue fund.
Yes.
So that's not general fund. I just want to make sure that's all included.
All right. That is included in the motion as we understand then. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter? Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
All right. Another agenda item,
Kelly,
poll pads.
if you could move to the next slide, please. I apologize for that. We had some formatting issues between what I did and how it showed up here. But, you know, the same day that we had our demonstration of the voting equipment, I received a phone call from our poll pad vendor, No Inc., informing me that Apple informed them that the poll pads that we currently use are not going to be supported by Apple going forward. So, well, Apple's a very proprietary system. So those iPads that we had were probably, we purchased them in 2015, so they're 6 years old. Yeah, they're no longer going to be supported, so we're going to need to purchase new iPads. Checked with the state's attorney's office, and per the state's attorney's office, No Inc.'s a professional service agreement. We don't need to bid it. That being said, I did check some prices at a couple places. No Inc. is giving us a quote of $310 for new iPads. Best Buy and Computer Discount Warehouse up in Chicago, they're $330 to $335 a piece. So I wasn't able to find any place that gets us an iPad that was cheaper than what No Inc. was going to give to us. But there's going to be some additional things. You've seen those fluorescent green cases that we've got downstairs that hold the iPads. Because the new iPads are going to be a little bit bigger, we're going to have to retrofit. They're going to probably need to put in a new case for those, and their quote on that case is $125 a piece. Plus, there's a new docking sled that are $14 a piece. So that being said, that's a grand total of $72,738. Plus, for them to come on site to set things up would be another $2,000. So for $74,738. So it's my recommendation that we enter into an agreement with No Inc. for the iPad replacement for 162 units, not exceeding $74,738.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I move to concur with the recommendation of the county clerk.
Is there a second? Ms. Parker?
Polk.
Okay. Mr. Wheeler?
Just note this is, again, lost revenue funds as well. This is critical infrastructure for the county. We're allowed to use money for that purpose. So it's not going to impact general fund.
Mr. Feathering?
Dan, if you bought those from Best Buy, does that come from the one right here in Bradley, or does it come from the corporate?
Well, I checked from corporate.
So it would just be coming, where is this No Inc. from, do you know?
No Inc. is down in St. Louis.
Down in St. Louis, okay, thank you.
And they have, they are a nationwide
And
organization.
they've been around for a certain
Absolutely.
time. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Any other questions? We have a motion on the floor. A roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Mr. Fairfield? Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dennell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler? Motion carries.
Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It occurs to me, and I'm glad I thought of it now, the authority for me to sign the agreement with Liberty regarding the yearly purchases. I need to either make sure that that was part of the original motion, because I think the motion said buy the equipment, also sign the agreement for the maintenance and everything else. We didn't say it, so I just probably need the motion in the second. Or do we need to have a separate motion in a second for me to sign that
Who made
agreement?
that motion?
Fairfield and Payton. Mr. Fairfield, Mr. Payton.
Mr. Fairfield, was that included in your motion?
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks for making it easy. I just wanted to get it on the record. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mr. Payton, as a second, you approve?
Yes, sir.
All right, but that'll be included in the record. All right. We'd move to the county clerk's reports. A motion to combine and approve the county clerk's reports would be in order.
Polk.
Dr. Polk, Long for a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
Thank you all very much.
Nothing more? All right.
I'm
Then
running.
we move on to the Finance Office. Mr. McCarty. You have the miscellaneous financial reports in front of you. You can examine those as Mr. McCarty comes up. We would start with sales tax as the first thing we would examine.
You ought to be walking on clouds, you just got $1 million. 1.3.
Good morning.
Good morning. We'll start off with sales tax. You'll see there was a very large spike this month, and it's from the retail month of March. So looking back, that's when the stimulus hit. So we had a lot of discussion back then what the impact may be, and now we're able to actually see it. Interesting, I look back for my own personal one, it hit March 17th. So this could also show up potentially April and possibly May, so we'll see. But not only individually, but you look back at that size of number, 536,000 total, our combined number. And we have to go back probably to FY 13 and 14 area where we were still involved and still a recipient of the City of Kankakee contract that they had that the Supreme Court took away. So that's a significant number that we haven't seen for a number of years. So so we'll see if it's just a 1 month, or we'll see if it shows up in multiple months or not there. And the sales tax report that shows Bradley, Bourbonnais, and the City of Kankakee, you'll see that it showed up everywhere for all of our, I'm assuming it showed up in, in every jurisdiction, in the county. So some interesting information there. Significant impact. We're also seeing similar significant impacts, income tax and PPRT, the personal property replacement tax. So the timing couldn't be better, is what we'll discuss in our cash flow model. But so we've had some significant impacts, from a monthly distribution standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see what, to get back to what normal actually looks like after the last 2 years. So a lot of the models that I'm working with projections, I'm going back to 2019 just because, what we've gone through in 2020 and now with spikes in 21, they're nice. It's nice to have that, but I don't believe that's anything to average at this point. So it's unique to certain situations.
Are questions on any of those revenue items? If not, let's move on.
All right. Cash flow wise, we are in and about through the lowest point of our cash flow year, if you will. The June 21 estimated, you'll see 1.7. The reality of that is that we have a payroll early next week, so that will also have to take care of that payroll, which is right at $1 million every 2 weeks. So before the distribution, which Mr. Africano said it'll happen right after July 4th, we will have one more payroll, and we have AP today to calculate. So my estimation without, and this is the first year we've done it without not only tax anticipations, but without an early property property tax distribution. So we made it, but before the first the first distribution happens, we'll probably be in a range between $400,000 and $600,000 left in the bank before that distribution. So we made it, but we would not be able to do another payroll or pay many bills at that level. So we are within the 45, 60-day window right now. We do have a handful of number of larger invoices sitting there, but a handful is way better than previous years where we had hundreds, and a lot of people calling, a lot of people upset. So so we did it. It's close, but and I'll be glad after that first distribution this year, so I'll be able to sleep and not worry about it. But thank God we got these distributions, these monthly distributions of sales tax, and the spikes that we got. It helped us, get through and accomplish that. So that is a major accomplishment, although it's still tight, and it's still very nerve-wracking to say the least. But we were able to do it, and we'll open up the rest of the year as we see the flow and everything continue. But this is the most important year as you see what happens after distribution and the amount of cash that we have available. It's for regular operational purposes. So so that's the update. We're almost there and through it. So I don't know if there's any questions or not with that.
I see no questions. Let's move on then.
Alrighty.
I'm not aware of any claims not recommended for approval, so we'll move on from that item. The monthly claims report has been distributed to you. We need a motion to approve the monthly claims. Mr. Long, Mr. Payton, any discussion on monthly claims? Hearing none, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton, Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling, Mr. Dennell, Mr. Miller, Mr. Long, Mr. Hunter, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Thank you. We move on to ARPA lost revenue adjustment, please.
Yeah, for the ARPA, and we've discussed a lot the lost revenue calculation. We've kind of looked at some hypothetical models the last couple of months. Well, GFOA provided its constituents that were interested with a worksheet. They developed a worksheet and it's locked. So you basically just plug away and it calculates for you and takes into consideration all the factors that are there. So there was a nice tool. So I took and plugged all of our information in, and it will not give you whether you should use 4.1% or a different percent until you fill it all in. So we went back all the way to 2016, used the annual audits or annual report, plugged it all in, and the recommendation from GFOA for us for the lost revenue calculation for the first one here as of 12/31 of 20 would be that we are allowed to adjust $6,475,228 if we want to, for that purpose. And so I have that here as far as the summary page. At the top of the page it says GFOA ARPA revenue replacement calculator, and then in the very next page what I did is I just gave you an update similar to what Chairman Wheeler had up there. This is more in an income statement format. With the first payment of $10,669,703, which is now here and in the bank, if we were to do the transfer out from it's now so the 10.6 million is in the ARPA fund that we've already created, and we just created the lost revenue fund. So then the transfer would be that 6.4 million going from transfer out to transfer into the lost revenue fund. And then I just put an estimate in because the board had not voted on, the voting machines had not processed that yet. So I just plugged an estimate in just to show like a running balance. We could put the corner, we could add the corner piece to this as well for the x-ray machine. And we'll keep a running balance. So so this is how we'll flow it. And it's a combined balance because all of the funds can be used for the COVID reason, and we've discussed, hopefully thoroughly enough, and we can continue to answer questions as far as just the difference between, the abilities of use between the two funds, and keep a running total. So, so if it's this committee's pleasure to do that, Chairman and I have had a discussion on whether or not it's okay to, as far as the finance committee, or if it should go to the full board. There's not any, I have not read anything come across that says it has to have a like a resolution, or not. I personally, neither opinion is right or wrong from what we've read. I guess it's up to the committee. I think the chairman is okay with the finance committee. I felt better if it went to the full board, just to make sure if any federal auditors came in here in 6-7 years from now, will a resolution be better than, and committee, it doesn't clarify it. So I don't know if there's any opinions on that, and neither one are right or wrong at this point. It's more of a comfort zone. Just, offer that for whatever your pleasure is here at this point. So.
Mr. Chairman, do you want to say anything?
No, it's Steve laid it out pretty well.
Okay.
He's just he feels that maybe a resolution on the full board side would be appropriate. I don't see that it's a negative to have that at all. So I just didn't want to have wanted to have the discussion with the committee to see what they wanted to do, because technically we're lump sum budget, so the committee can do what they need to do within the budgets based on that. It doesn't need to go to the full board unless you're doing budget amendments. So unless it's something amendable, I just thought to keep it cleaner and just to not gum up the process and waiting weeks to do things between the two committees, we have that flexibility to approve everything in finance. But Steve's opinion, and I think it's valid, it wouldn't hurt to have that extra layer of the full board blessing that as well. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. We can take the action we need to do if there's a time crunch on something, but why not send it to the full board for the resolution as well?
So I need, what is the pleasure of the committee? You want to discuss? Do you want to have a motion? Mr. Featherland.
I make a motion that we send it to the full board. So we'll all be on the same page.
All right. I didn't see Dr. Polk. If you would, we'll allow Dr. Polk's motion to take precedent. All right, is there a second on that one? Mr. Feathering's seconding that.
I would just need a definition of what it is. What are we sending to the full board? What is it?
Dr. Polk, would you prefer that Mr. McCarty make a recommendation there?
Yes.
Would you define it?
So
and
it
then see if she approves that in the motion?
Yeah, the GFOA Arbor revenue replacement calculator amount of $6,475,228 for lost revenue calculation.
So that is your recommendation for it?
Yes, sir.
Is that adequate?
That's adequate, and it also clarifies my second question is we can still manage that 6.48 here at the finance side of things and approve spend within the 6.48. So it really alleviates my only concern by defining that. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Let's just do a roll call on this to be clear.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton? Aye. Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger? Aye. Mr. Fairfield? Aye. Mr. Featherling? Aye. Mr. Dennell? Aye. Mr. Miller? Aye. Mr. Long? Aye. Mr. Hunter? Aye. Mr. Wheeler? Aye. Motion carries.
And the last agenda item, the single auditor and WIOA monitoring update.
Yeah, I wanted to take a moment here and this year and do something different, and rightfully so. There's two letters, two email communications. One with the workforce, they call it monitoring, which is auditing of the workforce funds, and then one from SKDO. So LaDonna Russell, the executive director from our local Grundy, Livingston, Kankakee Workforce Board, sent one summary of their exit conference with the WIOA staff, and then from Jackie Meals from SKDO on the single audit. The importance of that is between the two, the county level and then adding in the workforce, we average between 6.6 to $7.5 million of federal funds that are managed. And if any of you have ever seen or heard of the uniform guidance, and then we're talking a lot about ARPA. Here's 34 pages now of specific reporting and compliance information that we have to read and digest, along with everything else that they've sent that we have to carry around now to answer questions. But I just wanted to acknowledge Chris Kerner in my office. Chris, stand up. I'm going to embarrass him here. So, Chris took over this role in 2017 when Nicole left, and has done a great job, and to have no findings on either level handling the millions of dollars that we do, it should be acknowledged, and as well as our sports staff, Devlin and Tracy, in the office. But Chris does a great job with all of this and helps guide me through as well, the intricacies of understanding what's required. So I just wanted to thank Chris and acknowledge and everybody acknowledge as well.
All right, thank you.
So unless there's any other questions, we also are working on Moody's rating call for next Tuesday. So if any of you want to feel like you're sitting in the principal's office again, come on and join us.
Looks like the chairman's going to be there.
I do have one question. Steve.
Yes.
Steve, it occurred to me that you might be able to help with an explanation here. So, as background, we are the fiscal agent for the Workforce Board for Grundy, Livingston, and Kankakee County. Sorry, I'm thinking ahead there, but yeah, for ourselves as well. But we are obviously not, we're not the management per se of that. We're the fiscal agent. So as such, we make recommendations on internal controls, and we're accountable to those internal controls. But would I be fair in saying that the Grundy GLK Workforce Board is management, and we are the ministerial entity that executes their policies, if you will? Is that the relationship typically that exists?
Yeah, I would say that's a fair,
It's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Because it shows the role that the Kankakee County has, this board, as management of our fiscal systems within the county, and our role in creating a fiscal policy and procedure manual that we updated in 2019 to include all of the accounting going to the auditor's office. So I wanted to mention that as an example of what the management/ministerial roles are. We are management, others are ministerial on auditing and executing the management of those systems. So I just wanted to make sure the board was clear on their role, because some out there have purported that there's something else going on when it's exactly the opposite, and it's on the record of what is supposed to be happening here and currently not happening from the auditor's office at their own choice. So I just want to mention that. Thank you.
Any other items for Finance Department? If not, thank you. We'll move on to the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Africano's on Zoom for us. We need a motion to combine his reports. Mr. Dunhill, is there a second motion to combine and approve those reports?
Oh,
Mr. Payton? And this is a voice vote, so all in favor say aye.
aye.
Opposed, nay. Let the record record that Dr. Polk said aye. And we move, Mr. Africano, what comments do you have for us?
Well, Chairman Lear, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. We are in the process of tax collection, as many of you know. And on the 30th is the end of the first installment date. And we've been running about $4 to $5 million ahead of schedule from last year, which is a sign. So I'm hoping that our collection rate this year will be higher than it's been. And right now it looks like that might be the case as well. We've had really that more people are paying off-site, so at banks, drive-thrus, by mail, online has certainly gone up. And as Steve mentioned, I'm going to do the first distribution after the 4th of July. I'm going to distribute to Steve around the 25th of July, if that's okay with him. That's just a joke, Steve. Don't get upset. I'll distribute the first week of July. So our first week to second week. That's really all I have right now. Everything is going fine in our office with tax collection.
Other questions? I'm not seeing any questions, so we thank you for your report. And we'll move on to the...
Thank you. Have a good day.
We'll move on to the Sheriff's Department. You have the monthly update of the Sheriff's Department in your packet. You can examine that as the Sheriff is coming up. Good morning.
Good morning. The first thing on the agenda was the surplus radio equipment.
Did you want to make any comments on the monthly updates?
Oh, I'm jumping ahead. Not really. It's been pretty. Pretty consistent.
Okay.
Our traffic. I think I reported to the Criminal Justice Committee about the traffic coming in and out of the courthouse as we reopen. It has increased significantly, which is a good thing because catching up with the backlog at the courthouse is going to be difficult. And the increased traffic is a plus because that means things are happening. So I guess that's a plus. And other than that, everything's pretty.
Okay. Are there questions in terms of the report anyone wants to ask? Mr. Hunter?
I just have one question, Sheriff. With the tweaking of the lateral entry ordinance for the city, and they'll probably be using your correctional officers as an area for hiring to Kankakee City. Do you anticipate an issue?
I apologize. I don't know what their tweaking was. Was it experience or?
Well, they're making it a lot more easier, for the lateral entry process. In other words, guys, some of the departments have like a lateral entry program ordinance policy for police and fire, and they can transfer people in to those respective departments for employment. And what the city is trying to do is to make it easier because the new administration came in to office with a deficit of 10 police officers, with all the shootings and all that craziness, and they're operating at a emergency situation in terms of trying to deploy the personnel to combat the issues which you, state police, DEA, ATF are trying to help Kankakee City with. So I'm sure that they'll probably provide us or you with the tweaking of the new policy and ordinance.
Well, and we, the Sheriff's Office, the Merit Commission who does our hiring also tweaked our lateral rules and even the new hire rules, I think 2 or 3 years ago, which increased some credit for military. It increased credit for those working in law enforcement now. So, bless you. So those things are happening for a number of reasons. Number one, because sometimes I think our society now has determined, some of our societies determined that police are bad and that there are people that don't want to be police right now. So people are tweaking all the rules to try to get in. Will that affect us? Sure. I mean, one of the things that we've always done, and you know, corrections back in the day and even now has been considered somewhat of a stepping stone to working the street. We're fortunate that we have been able to retain a number of correctional officers who have made it a career, and I think that benefits everybody in the long run. But so yeah, will it affect us? I'm sure it will. We would never discourage anybody from trying to do what they want to do personally, and to keep them local. And I've argued since I was hired at the jail back in 1995 that anybody who can work in that jail can work the street significantly easier, because I think they have the experience in knowing who those are in custody, and knowing the games, and knowing what they're about, and knowing who their family is, knowing who their acquaintances are. So yeah, it's not uncommon.
All right,
Thank you.
let's move on then. The next agenda item, declaring the radio equipment as surplus.
Yeah, I actually brought some other surplus equipment to criminal justice, and the one list I had was a handwritten list that I didn't feel was appropriate to bring to the board, so I had it typed up nice and handy for everybody to this committee. It is radio equipment that is of no use to us, and we believe no use to anybody else, and we just want to dispose of it properly. So
All right, so do we have a motion to declare the equipment on the list the sheriff has submitted?
What are you gonna do with it?
recycle it.
There's also a federal signal obsolete light bar. Is that part of what we're just? Because at least on my state, here's a list of surplus vehicle and equipment.
What they're looking at.
Is that, do we?
Yeah, I believe, yeah, that was done at criminal justice, I believe. Yeah, that was already done at criminal justice. This is a separate list.
So that has nothing to do with that?
Nothing to do with that. That was, they've already declared it surplus at criminal justice.
I have a question about that, though.
Yes.
If it's obsolete, is it to our advantage to declare that surplus or to destroy it?
Well, if we declare it surplus and we can't get rid of it, we will destroy it.
But do we want to get rid of it? I guess that's my real question.
It really does us no good. I mean, there's nothing we can do to it.
Does it do society harm? Maybe that's the way to put it.
In what way?
Well, evidently it's related to police squad cars. And so now I don't know what makes it obsolete, but if I purchased that, could I put that on my car?
I would love you to.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
I believe that this stuff is all being destroyed.
Thank you.
All right,
Question for Mr. Featherman.
Mr. President.
Even the light bars are being destroyed then too?
Yes.
And the blue and red is out of style, or how, I don't understand.
The way that the equipment works with the vehicles, sometimes it doesn't fit anymore. So, but if another squad car can use, another police agency can use it, we'll obviously get it to them, but otherwise, yeah,
So
they're
like
obsolete.
Crown Vics or Mercuries or stuff
Right,
like
yeah,
that?
cars that we don't,
Yeah.
they don't even make anymore.
Okay, thanks.
Did we get a motion? We need a motion. Okay, we need a motion to Mr. Long, Mr. Donnell, declaring this radio equipment that's submitted by the sheriff as surplus. We've got a motion and a second now, so we'll need a roll call vote.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Ms. Polk, you're on mute.
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Ms. Parker, Mr. Kinzinger,
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dennell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter, Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Okay, body cam price adjustment.
Yeah, as this committee recalls, and I know the full board approved it, last month I came to you with the bids that we received from two vendors, one who bid everything that we had asked for, and another that did not. So there was really one qualified bidder. In those bids, there were 3 bids, of which I gave you as a committee only 2. One was for body cams for $86,690, and the other one was for the in-car camera system for $231,956, for a total of $318,646, which this committee approved, and we moved it to the full board, and they also approved it up to $318,000. One of the things that I did not do for obvious reasons when you hear this, and I don't want you to be shocked, just let me finish before you fall out of your chair. The last bid was for the in-car computer, the laptop itself, which are fairly expensive. Every car we have has one, every marked car we have has one. We have a mix of in-car computers dating back all the way to 2008. I did not bring that bid to you because the bid for those computers was $168,000, and I didn't want to ask you for almost $500,000. Well, no, I didn't want to ask you for. I figured that we could limp through. If we have to replace 1 or 2 over a period of time, we could do that. So in the course of last week, I think it was last week, so that the total of those 3 now would have been $487,000, almost $500,000. $318,000 of which you approved. We did get notified last week that we received a grant for $276,620 from the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. So if we are able to purchase those in-car laptops, the ask now isn't $318,000, it's only $210,000. And that is with additional grants that we have submitted as well. So we may even have more grant money once we find out through some other grants that we've applied for. Amy Ludke is the one who submitted the grant to the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. We just got notified last week. And I'm not sure if the state understands how county finances work, but part of the stipulation of this grant was that we had to have the invoice by June 30th, and we have to have it paid by July 31st, which is now at $210,000 if you guys approve it. So they're literally asking us to take care of this in a timely manner. Now, Steve, I'm not sure if that works for your cash flow, but and the other issue that affects our laptops in the cars, some of you may know that the federal government uses UCR reports, Uniform Crime Reports. Every police agency in the country submits information through the Uniform Crime Reports. Well, as the federal government often does, they've now changed this system to what's called NIBRS. NIBRS is the National Incident-Based Reporting System that is replacing UCR. Here's where the problem comes in with our laptops. NIBRS requires a 64-bit computer. And all of our computers are all 32-bit computers. So that's part of the reason why I'm coming back to you now to say, you know, we're kind of, our hands are kind of tied. Fortunately, with the grant, I mean, we still end up paying less, but would just need your approval.
Mr. Kinzer.
I need to summarize this so that I get a grasp of it. It appears that we approved 318 for body cameras
And in-car cameras.
in-car cameras, and now you're coming back and saying we're going to add the computers, and with this grant, we're only going to spend 218,000.
210,000.
210.
Yes,
Is that what you're saying?
that's correct.
That's a no-brainer. Thank you.
So do you have a motion, Mr.
Yes,
Kinzer?
I do.
And the motion is?
Oh, that we move forward as the sheriff has presented it, that purchase the body cameras, the car cameras, and the computers. Not to exceed
There's a second by
215,000.
Ms. Parker. Mr. Wheeler?
Mr. Chairman, are we amending the original approval to just include computers? I think that might be the cleanest thing, because we've already have something passed at the full board. We just bring that back as an amendment to the previous pass.
Yeah, we're actually spending less money.
We're spending less money. The not to exceed can still stay there. We just have to add computer.
I'd like to make that motion.
Seems cleaner.
Add the computers and receive a check for 100,000.
I'll work on that.
Ms. Parker, you're seconding that? Mr. McCarty, I think you needed a comment.
Well, I just had a clarification I was writing down. Did you say the end of June or end of July to pay?
End of July.
Okay, we're good then.
Yeah. I tried to call to find out how they expected counties to do this in such a short turnaround, but like most organizations, I got nowhere.
Mr. Feather.
Mike, are those current brackets and things that you use going to work?
Yeah, those are the docs
So
are
you
included.
don't have to change.
Docs
Oh,
are
it comes
included.
with that.
Yeah, they're included.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
All right. We have,
What is the motion before us now in light of what our chairman has said?
The motion is to amend the previous authorization to include the word computers and associated equipment.
Yeah.
How about that?
That's great.
Yeah.
and that was your motion, Mr.
Yes,
Kinzer.
it will be.
All right. This will be a roll call vote then.
Mr. Lear,
Aye.
Ms. Polk,
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Mr. Payton,
Aye.
Ms. Parker,
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger, Mr. Fairfield,
Aye.
Mr. Featherling,
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell,
Aye.
Mr. Miller,
Aye.
Mr. Long,
Aye.
Mr. Hunter,
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler. Motion carries.
Anything else, Sheriff?
Yeah, one last thing. I know Mr. Hess had requested us to explore options of being able to have Zoom out at the Criminal Justice Center, or the Public Safety Center, rather. And at this point, we are unable to do that. We are waiting on some price quotes to see what exactly we need, but it may be almost too expensive not to make it worth it. So, but we are getting some prices. If we can do it, I'll bring it back to the right people. But as of right now, our criminal justice is going to have to be here unless you get rid of Zoom. So,
All right, then.
thank you. Thanks,
Nothing
everybody.
else, let's move on. I have nothing from the auditor's office. I don't know that any member of the committee has anything from the auditor's office. So we'll move on from that. Is there any other business? That's listed on the agenda, so I have to ask. I don't see any. Old business, the ATM agreement authorization. Mr. Chairman, would you speak to that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Lear. So I had noticed at one point that we had an ATM in the first floor, and normally those agreements include a revenue sharing agreement with the host, us being the host. That machine did not. And so I told Wes that I was going to find a vendor who would share the ATM fees with the county, because we need to address revenue at all possibilities. Unfortunately, the current vendor decided to come and pick it up like about 2.5 weeks ago when we told them it was gonna be a later date. So I had to get a machine in there right away because people need to have access to that cash if they so need it for the people there. So the agreement is in front of you. The machine is sitting downstairs because I had to get something. And so if we don't want to have an ATM or don't want to use this company, or the dollar per transaction is not acceptable, it's not going to solve any problems, but it's definitely not going to contribute to any problems either. I will say that if they don't want to pay the dollar, there's an ATM right across the street at the bank. So it is a convenience, and for that, I think it's worthwhile. So,
Mr. Searay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wheeler, is this the only ATM that's in the county, or is there others in the courthouse, or?
there's some in the courthouse. I believe they might have one out at the jail too. Maybe.
Are we sharing any or all of those also? Or?
Those aren't necessarily under our control.
Okay.
Those are under the custody of the sheriff.
Gotcha.
So he makes those decisions in those buildings.
Is there a motion on this?
Whatever the,
Mr. Dunhill, your motion is to approve? All right, motion to approve, is there a second? Mr. Fair, Dr. Polk, second. We'll need a roll call vote, please. Just a minute. Ms. Weber.
I'm wondering what the share is.
$1.
$1.
Dollar transaction.
Mr. Witt?
Just to let people know, it's a 2-year agreement. So when the board changes, it's a series of 2 years agreements. The other one, I could find no agreement. There was no contract or anything. So that's why it was, hey, come pick it up, and it just got picked up sooner than we wanted.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, a roll call vote, please.
Mr. Lear?
Aye.
Ms. Polk?
Aye.
Ms. Weber?
Aye.
Mr. Payton?
Aye.
Ms. Parker?
Aye.
Mr. Kinzinger?
Aye.
Mr. Fairfield?
Aye.
Mr. Featherling?
Aye.
Mr. Dunnell?
Aye.
Mr. Miller?
Aye.
Mr. Long?
Aye.
Mr. Hunter?
Aye.
Mr. Wheeler?
Aye.
Motion carries.
The circuit clerk staffing request. Do we have someone to speak to that?
Sandy, I'm on,
You're on Zoom, okay? I see you now.
thank you. I'm down in Springfield, so I'm sorry I'm not there able to attend in person, but thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. The clerk's office is the hub of the Criminal Justice Division. When court view is not current with minutes and court dates, the system breaks down. Public defender and probation cannot serve their client. The state's attorney victim witness coordinators cannot serve their people. Due to COVID, we've had to reschedule thousands of cases. From January to the end of May, we rescheduled 49,000 cases while continuing to maintain the caseloads. COVID has put my office further behind than ever. In late April, the chief judge strongly urged me to do whatever it takes to get caught up. In the month of May, my staff stepped up and performed 400 hours of overtime. It did put a dent in the backlog, but we're not there yet. I'm requesting 3 clerks dedicated to the courts. The average wage of those who performed the 400 hours in May was about $17.50 an hour. The overtime rate would be $26.25 per hour, which was an average of around $10,500 for the month of May. A new hire is right around $13.50 per hour. 400 hours over that month would equate to a little over 3 clerks at 35 hours per week. We don't have enough bodies to cover all the courts and the visiting judges. I went to court last week myself for the animal control court call, and there were over 362 tickets for that court call. The 3 clerks would cost around $75,000. We can't keep going at this rate. The month of June is not over yet. They're doing overtime again, and it should be probably close to the same number of hours as it was in May. So that's my request.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Featherling?
Is there any temporary services that are available so we don't have to permanently hire people? Or is there like temp agencies for that type of work, Sandy?
Well, the work is so specific that the training, it takes a good while to get the training caught up. It's having to understand what the court processes are. So, you're investing 6 months of training, so that really wouldn't work.
But wouldn't you have to train the new hires also for 6 months?
Correct.
Yeah.
But we would, we still need the body, so that's the problem. Getting caught up is one thing, but then carrying on is another. The way the court calls are, the traffic court calls run about 3,000 tickets a month, and those clerks don't have time to get their work done, and then they're running off to do the misdemeanor court. So what I'd like to do is have a dedicated clerk to the misdemeanors alone. That's the way the courts have set it up currently now. They've taken most of the misdemeanors, if they're not related to any felony cases, the misdemeanors are in their own separate court call, and they're with the traffic judges. Well, the traffic clerks can't keep up with both court calls. It's just too much. The domestic violence court call was divided into 2 court calls now, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. The morning call is more than enough for one person, and that person would then have to go down and take the minutes, but then doesn't have time to get anything into the computer. We've been borrowing from Peter to pay Paul throughout all of this with staff. We've had people that will at least help get court dates into the computer when they're caught up with their work, but you're pulling people off of their desk to do this, and then other things are being left behind. We've had expungements are becoming a bigger process with I'm down here in Springfield, and they're talking a lot about more expungements, and that we have an expungement clerk, but if she's trying to help with court calls, she's not getting the expungements done. The state police sends down many requests for information that we have a clerk that does that. Well, if she drops what she's doing to go to court, then she's not providing the service to the state police to get the information so people can get their FOID cards, they can get a job, they can get all these things that they need to do. I mean, we're just as stretched as we can be, and we really need 3 clerks.
Any other comments from Ms. Weber?
How much would they make an hour?
Around $14.50, and that's not even an entry level of our office. That's the middle incoming level.
Thank you.
Ms. Weber, did you have?
I was going to make the motion so we could discuss it.
All
I'll
right.
move that we approve a request to hire 3 new clerks for the circuit clerk.
Is there a second?
Polk.
Second by Dr. Polk. Discussion. Mr. Hunter?
Motion to table.
Motion to table is not debatable if there is a second. Is there a second? Mr. Kissinger seconds. Motion to table does not require a roll call vote unless one is requested. All in favor of the motion to table, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
The motion carries. We move on to our next agenda item. Is Mr. Feathering?
That motion we adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Mr. Long? All in favor say aye. Opposed, nay.